The champagne flute slipped from my trembling fingers, crystal shattering against the marble floor of the Grand Ballroom as 300 wedding guests turned to stare at me. But the broken glass wasn't what made my cheeks burn with humiliation. It was my sister-in-law Jessica's voice, amplified by the microphone she'd somehow commandeered during what was supposed to be my maid of honor speech, announcing to everyone present that I was still single at 32 because I obviously have commitment issues, just like with everything else in her pathetic little life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The silence that followed felt eternal. My wedding dress, the one I'd spent months choosing, suddenly felt too tight, too white, too much like a costume I had no right to wear. David, my husband of exactly 47 minutes, stood frozen beside me, his face cycling through confusion, embarrassment, and something that looked dangerously close to agreement with his sister's assessment. That look, that momentary flicker of doubt in his eyes, as he glanced between Jessica and me, cut deeper than any words could have. The Grand Ballroom of the Riverside Manor had been my dream venue since I was 16 years old. I'd driven past it countless times during high school, imagining my future wedding reception in its elegant space with the crystal chandeliers casting rainbow prisms across the dance floor and the floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the river. 20 years later, I'd finally made that dream a reality, or so I thought. My name is Sarah Elizabeth Morrison, though as of 47 minutes ago, I was officially Sarah Elizabeth Chen. I'm a senior marketing coordinator at Harrison & Associates, a mid-sized advertising firm in downtown Portland, and until this moment, I'd considered myself reasonably successful, moderately attractive, and generally well-liked. I have my own apartment, a reliable car that's paid off, and a savings account that allowed me to contribute significantly to this wedding that was now dissolving into a nightmare before my eyes. The humiliation began innocuously, and Jessica had volunteered to help with the wedding planning 6 months ago, presenting herself as the helpful future sister-in-law, who wanted nothing more than to ensure David and I had the perfect day. She was 3 years younger than David's 34 years, making her just a year younger than me, but she carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd never questioned her place in the world. Married to my brother-in-law Marcus for 4 years, Jessica had established herself as the unofficial social coordinator of the Chen family, organizing holiday gatherings, birthday celebrations, and family vacations with the efficiency of a professional event planner. I should have recognized the warning signs earlier. During our first planning meeting at her perfectly appointed home in the suburbs, Jessica had listened to my ideas about the wedding with what I interpreted as supportive interest. I'd brought magazine clippings, Pinterest boards, and detailed notes about everything from color schemes to catering preferences. She'd nodded enthusiastically, taking notes in her monogrammed planner, occasionally offering suggestions that seemed helpful at the time. "You know, Sarah," she'd said while reviewing my flower arrangements, "baby's breath is quite traditional, but have you considered something more modern? Something that reflects your personality better?" Her tone was sweet, supportive, the voice of someone who genuinely wanted to help. I'd appreciated her input, grateful to have another woman's perspective on decisions that sometimes felt overwhelming. Over the following months, Jessica's involvement in the wedding planning had grown exponentially. She'd volunteered to coordinate with vendors, claiming she had better relationships with local suppliers through her previous event planning experience. She'd offered to handle the seating arrangements, insisting she understood family dynamics better than I did. She'd even suggested modifications to my chosen menu, arguing that her recommendations would be more appealing to the diverse group of relatives and friends we were expecting. Each suggestion had been presented as helpful guidance from someone with more experience. When she recommended changing the color scheme from the soft pastels I'd originally chosen to a more dramatic palette of deep burgundy and gold, she'd explained how the darker colors would photograph better and create a more sophisticated atmosphere. When she suggested altering the music selection for the reception, replacing my carefully curated playlist with what she called more crowd-pleasing options, she'd emphasized her knowledge of what gets people dancing at weddings. I'd agreed to most of her suggestions, partly because they seemed reasonable and partly because I wanted to maintain harmony within the family I was joining. David had always spoken fondly of Jessica, describing her as organized, social, and someone who genuinely cared about bringing people together. His parents, Helen and Robert Chen, clearly adored their daughter-in-law, frequently praising her hostessing skills and her ability to coordinate family gatherings that everyone actually enjoyed attending. The dress incident should have been my first real warning. 3 weeks before the wedding, Jessica had accompanied me to my final fitting at Bella's bridal boutique. The dress I'd chosen was elegant but understated, a classic A-line silhouette in ivory silk with delicate beading along the bodice. I'd fallen in love with it the moment I'd tried it on, feeling beautiful and confident in a way that seemed to capture exactly who I wanted to be on my wedding day. "It's lovely," Jessica had said when I emerged from the dressing room, but something in her tone suggested a reservation she wasn't expressing directly. "Very traditional, very safe." The way she emphasized safe made it sound like a criticism rather than a compliment. "I think traditional is what I'm going for," I'd replied, studying my reflection in the three-way mirror. The dress fit perfectly, the alterations having created clean lines that flattered my figure without being overly dramatic. "Oh, absolutely," Jessica had agreed quickly. "It's just that with your coloring, I wonder if pure white might be more striking than ivory. And maybe something with a bit more presence. You'll be the center of attention. After all, you want to make sure you command the room." Her comments had planted seeds of doubt that grew over the following weeks. Was the dress too plain? Would I blend into the background on what was supposed to be the most important day of my life? I'd returned to the boutique twice, trying on alternative options that Jessica had suggested, but none of them felt right. They were beautiful dresses, but they weren't me. Eventually, I decided to trust my original instinct and stick with my first choice, but the confidence I'd initially felt had been undermined by Jessica's subtle criticisms. The morning of the wedding had started beautifully. My maid of honor, my college roommate, Amanda, had arrived early to help with preparations, bringing coffee from my favorite cafe and a small bouquet of wildflowers she'd picked from her garden. We'd gotten ready together in the bridal suite at Riverside Manor, laughing about shared memories from our university days and marveling at how quickly life had moved since graduation. "You look absolutely radiant," Amanda had told me as she helped fasten the delicate pearl necklace that had been my grandmother's. "David is the luckiest man alive." The ceremony itself had been everything I'd dreamed it would be. The afternoon sun streamed through the chapel's stained glass windows, casting colored light across the assembled guests. David had looked handsome in his charcoal gray suit, his eyes never leaving mine as I walked down the aisle. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. His vows had been heartfelt and personal, referencing inside jokes and shared memories that made me tear up despite my determination not to cry and ruin my makeup. My own vows had been carefully written and practiced, expressing my love for David and my excitement about building a future together. I'd spoken about the qualities I admired in him, his kindness, his dedication to his work as a civil engineer, his close relationships with his family, and his ability to make me laugh even on difficult days. The words had felt genuine and meaningful as I spoke them, surrounded by the people who mattered most to us. The transition from ceremony to reception had been seamless, thanks in large part to Jessica's coordination effort. Guests had moved from the chapel to the ballroom for cocktail hour, while the wedding party took photographs in the manor's garden. The photographer, recommended by Jessica, had been professional and efficient, capturing both formal portraits and candid moments that I knew would become treasured memories. It was during the cocktail hour that I'd first noticed something amiss. Jessica had been unusually animated, moving through the crowd with what seemed like nervous energy rather than her usual composed confidence. She'd changed from her burgundy bridesmaid dress into a cocktail dress that was noticeably more formal and attention-grabbing than what the other guests were wearing. The dress itself was beautiful, a deep emerald green that complemented her dark hair and fair complexion, but it seemed more appropriate for a gala than a wedding reception. "Jessica looks stunning tonight," David's Aunt Margaret had commented as we observed the cocktail hour from across the room. "That dress must have cost a fortune." I'd agreed politely, though something about Jessica's appearance and demeanor had begun to make me uncomfortable. She seemed to be holding court with different groups of guests, engaging in animated conversations that drew laughter and attention. Normally, I would have appreciated her efforts to ensure everyone was having a good time, But tonight her behavior felt different, more performative than genuinely social. The dinner portion of the reception had proceeded smooth. The food was excellent. The speeches from David's best man and my father had been appropriately heartfelt and entertaining, and the overall atmosphere was festive and celebratory. I'd begun to relax, thinking that my earlier concerns about Jessica had been unfounded. Perhaps she was simply excited to be part of such a significant family celebration. The moment that changed everything came during what should have been my maid of honor speech. Amanda had planned to speak first, followed by Jessica as the matron of honor, a role she'd requested specifically. I'd been looking forward to both speeches, expecting them to be touching tributes to our friendship and family bonds. Amanda's speech had been perfect, a blend of humor and sentiment that had made me laugh and cry simultaneously. She'd shared stories about our college adventures, our support for each other through various life challenges, and her genuine happiness about my marriage to David. The guests had responded warmly, and I'd felt deeply grateful to have such a loyal friend standing beside me on this important day. Jessica had taken the microphone next, beginning with what seemed like a conventional maid of honor speech. She'd talked about meeting me for the first time, about watching David and me together as a couple, about the importance of family bond. Her delivery had been polished and confident, and I'd settled back in my chair to enjoy what I expected would be a lovely tribute. Then the tone had shifted, subtly at first, with comments about how marriage requires mature decision-making and the ability to fully commit to another person. She'd talked about the challenges facing modern couples, particularly those who wait until later in life to settle down, and might have established patterns that make compromise difficult. I'd begun to feel uneasy as her comments became more pointed, though I'd tried to convince myself that I was being overly sensitive. Perhaps she was simply nervous about public speaking, and her words weren't coming out exactly as she'd intended them. But then she'd looked directly at me, smiled sweetly, and delivered the crushing blow that had led to my current humiliation. Sarah has always been someone who takes her time with major decisions, Jessica had continued, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom sound system. Some might say too much time. I mean, she's 32 and this is her first marriage, which says something about her approach to commitment, doesn't it? The comment had drawn a few uncomfortable chuckles from guests who weren't sure how to interpret her words. I'd felt my stomach begin to twist, but I'd maintained my smile, hoping that whatever point she was making would resolve itself positively. And let's be honest, Jessica had continued, warming to her theme, Sarah's track record with follow-through isn't exactly stellar. Remember when she was going to get her MBA, but dropped out after one semester? Or when she was going to move to New York for that marketing job but decided it was too overwhelming? Or when she was going to learn French but gave up after buying the textbook? Each example she'd cited had been accurate, which made them sting even more. The MBA program had been incredibly demanding, and I'd realized after one semester that the financial stress and time commitment weren't sustainable while working full-time. The New York job had been with a company that had subsequently gone through massive layoffs, making my decision to stay in Portland look prescient rather than cowardly. The French lessons had been abandoned when my work schedule became too demanding to attend evening classes regularly. But presented in Jessica's framework, these decisions became evidence of a character flaw rather than reasonable responses to changing circumstances. The way she'd delivered each example with a tone of fond exasperation rather than malicious intent had made it difficult for guests to know whether they should laugh or feel uncomfortable on my behalf. So when David told us he was going to propose, Jessica had continued, building toward her devastating conclusion, we all held our breath, wondering if Sarah would actually follow through this time, or find some excuse to back out. I guess we have our answer, though I have to admit, I'm still a little surprised she made it all the way to the altar. Maybe David's finally found the secret to getting Sarah to commit to something for more than a few months. The applause that had followed had been polite but confused, with guests clearly uncertain whether they'd just witnessed a roast or a genuine expression of sisterly concern. I'd felt my face burning with embarrassment and anger, but I'd been too shocked to respond immediately. David had squeezed my hand under the table, but his expression had been unreadable. It was then that Jessica had made her fatal mistake. Perhaps emboldened by the reaction she'd received, or perhaps simply unable to resist pushing her advantage further. She'd added the comment about my commitment issues and pathetic little life that had finally provoked me to stand up, knocking over my champagne glass in the process. The sound of crystal shattering against marble had seemed to break the spell that had held the ballroom in uncomfortable silence. Suddenly everyone was talking at once, some guests rushing to clean up the broken glass, others engaging in whispered conversations about what they'd just witnessed. Jessica had handed the microphone back to the DJ with a satisfied smile, as if she'd just delivered exactly the speech she'd intended. David had stood up beside me, placing a protective hand on my arm, but I'd seen the uncertainty in his eye. In that moment, I'd realized that Jessica's words had found their target not just with the wedding guests, but with my new husband. Her carefully chosen examples of my supposed failures had resonated with doubts he'd apparently harbored, but never expressed directly. "Sarah," he'd said quietly, leaning close, so only I could hear over the resumed chatter of the guests, "maybe we should just let it go. Jessica probably didn't mean anything by it. You know how she gets when she's had a few drinks." But I'd counted Jessica's alcohol consumption throughout the evening, and she'd had exactly 2 glasses of wine with dinner. Her speech hadn't been the result of impaired judgment. It had been calculated and deliberate. The realization that David was already making excuses for her behavior, already choosing to minimize my humiliation rather than defend me, had been almost as devastating as the public embarrassment itself. I'd excused myself from the head table, mumbling something about needing to freshen up, and had fled to the ladies' room where I'd locked myself in a stall, and finally allowed the tears to come. The carefully applied makeup that had taken an hour to perfect was ruined within minutes, mascara streaking down my cheeks despite its supposed waterproof formula. Amanda had found me there 10 minutes later, having followed me with a bag containing emergency makeup supplies and tissue. She'd taken one look at my tear-stained face, and had immediately begun damage control, both emotional and cosmetic. "That was absolutely unforgivable," she'd said while helping me repair my makeup. "I cannot believe she said those things at your wedding reception. What is wrong with her?" "I don't know," I'd replied honestly. "I thought we got along well. I thought she was trying to help with the wedding planning. I never imagined she had such a low opinion of me." "It's not about having a low opinion of you," Amanda had said firmly. "This was deliberate sabotage. No one accidentally gives a speech like that." She planned every word. The possibility that Jessica's humiliation of me had been premeditated had made the situation even worse. It suggested a level of malice and calculation that I'd never suspected, despite having known her for the 3 years David and I had been together. When I'd finally returned to the ballroom, the reception had continued as if nothing unusual had happened. The DJ had started the music for dancing, and guests had begun to move to the dance floor, or gather around the bar for the evening's festivity. Jessica had been holding court near the head table, accepting congratulations from various family members who seemed to think her speech had been cleverly entertaining rather than cruel. David had approached me immediately upon my return, his expression apologetic but still tinged with the uncertainty I'd seen earlier. "Are you okay?" he'd asked, taking my hands in his. "I know Jessica's speech was a little harsh, but you know she doesn't mean anything by it. She's just always been direct in her communication style." The fact that he was characterizing her public humiliation of me as merely direct communication had been the final straw. I'd realized in that moment that David would never fully understand what Jessica had done to me, or why it mattered so much. He would always find ways to excuse her behavior, to minimize the impact of her words, to preserve family harmony at the expense of my feelings. "I'm fine," I'd lied, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. "Let's just get through the rest of the evening," and we had gotten through it. I danced with David for our first dance as husband and wife, posed for more photographs, cut the cake, and tossed my bouquet to the assembled single women. I'd played the role of the happy bride for the remaining 3 hours of the reception, smiling and laughing, and accepting congratulations as if my new sister-in-law hadn't just publicly humiliated me in front of everyone who mattered to me. But beneath the performance, a cold anger had been building. Jessica had made a calculated decision to use my wedding day as a platform for her own entertainment, regardless of the emotional cost to me. She'd deliberately chosen the most public possible moment to attack my character, ensuring maximum impact, and minimum opportunity for me to defend myself. Worse, she'd done it all with a smile, maintaining plausible deniability by framing her attacks as loving concern from a caring sister-in-law. Anyone who called her out on the cruelty of her words could be dismissed as being overly sensitive or unable to take a joke. It was masterfully executed character assassination disguised as wedding humor. The reception had finally ended at midnight, with guests gradually departing after offering their congratulations and best wishes for our future happiness. Jessica had made a point of hugging me goodbye, whispering in my ear about how beautiful the wedding had been, and how happy she was to officially welcome me to the family. Her words had been sweet and seemingly sincere, but I'd felt the satisfaction radiating from her as she'd delivered them. David and I had spent our wedding night in the honeymoon suite at Riverside Manor, a luxury accommodation that was part of our wedding package. What should have been a romantic beginning to our married life had instead been overshadowed by the events of the evening. David had tried to be affectionate and loving, but I'd been unable to shake the memory of Jessica's words and his failure to defend me. When he'd finally fallen asleep, I'd lain awake staring at the ceiling and replaying every moment of the evening. The humiliation still burned, but something else was growing alongside it, a determination that Jessica's actions would not go unanswered. She'd chosen to make me a target, and now she would discover that I wasn't as weak or pathetic as she'd portrayed me to be. I'd always been someone who preferred to avoid confrontation, to find diplomatic solutions to interpersonal problems, to maintain peace even when it meant swallowing my own feelings. But Jessica had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. She'd used my wedding day as a weapon against me, and that was something I couldn't forgive or forget. As dawn had broken over the river outside our honeymoon suite, I'd made a decision. Jessica wanted to play games with people's emotions and reputation. She wanted to use public humiliation as a tool for her own amusement. She demonstrated that she was willing to destroy special moments for the sake of her own entertainment. Fine, I would give her exactly what she'd given, but I would be smarter about it, more patient, more thorough in my planning. Jessica had shown her hand too early, revealing her true nature in a moment of overconfidence. Now it was my turn to plan a response that would be as devastating as it was perfectly justified. The honeymoon in Hawaii had provided me with a week to think and plan without distractions. David had attributed my occasional distraction to the stress of the wedding and the adjustment to married life, never suspecting that I was actually developing a comprehensive strategy for addressing his sister's behavior. I'd spent hours walking on the beach, apparently enjoying the sunset, but actually considering different approaches to the problem Jessica had created. By the time we'd returned to Portland, I'd known exactly what I was going to do. Jessica had made the mistake of attacking me on my wedding day, but she'd also given me valuable insight into her character and motivations. She was someone who craved attention and validation, who took pleasure in others' discomfort, and who believed herself to be cleverer than everyone around her. Those same traits that made her dangerous also made her vulnerable, and I was going to exploit every single one of them. The plan would take time to implement properly. Jessica's fourth wedding anniversary with Marcus was still 11 months away, but that gave me plenty of time to gather information, establish the necessary relationships, and prepare for the perfect moment to deliver my response to her wedding day humiliation. She'd shown me exactly how effective a public revelation could be when timed for maximum impact. Now she was going to learn that lesson from the receiving end. The first week back from our honeymoon in Maui was a careful dance of normalcy. David threw himself into his engineering projects with renewed energy, apparently convinced that the tropical sun and distance from family drama had restored our relationship to its pre-wedding state. I let him believe this while quietly beginning the most important research project of my life. My position at Harrison & Associates had taught me the value of thorough market research before launching any campaign. Consumer behavior analysis, demographic studies, competitive intelligence gathering. These skills, honed over 8 years in marketing, would serve me well in a very different kind of campaign. Jessica had unknowingly declared war on me, and I intended to win it using every professional technique I'd learned about understanding targets and exploiting weaknesses. The first step was information gathering. I needed to understand Jessica's life, her relationships, her secrets, and most importantly, her vulnerabilities. She'd spent months infiltrating my wedding planning, learning intimate details about my preferences and insecurity. Now it was my turn to study her with the same methodical attention. I started with social media, a treasure trove of personal information that people willingly broadcast to the world. Jessica maintained active profiles on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, each carefully curated to present different aspects of her persona. Her Facebook featured family photos and inspirational quotes about love and success. Instagram showcased her lifestyle, expensive handbags, restaurant meals, and vacation destinations. LinkedIn highlighted her professional achievements as a marketing consultant for luxury brands. The patterns emerged quickly. Jessica was deeply invested in maintaining an image of perfection, both personal and professional. Her posts were meticulously staged, her captions carefully crafted to elicit admiration and envy in equal measure. She tagged expensive restaurants, designer boutiques, and exclusive events with the frequency of someone whose self-worth depended on external validation. More telling were the photos themselves. Jessica never appeared candid or natural in any image. Every expression was practiced, every pose calculated for maximum impact. She favored shots that emphasized her designer clothing, her perfectly styled hair, her flawless makeup. Even casual family gatherings were documented with the precision of a professional photo shoot. The comments on her posts revealed another crucial detail about Jessica's psychology. She thrived on compliments and responded to praise with lengthy replies that managed to be simultaneously gracious and self-aggrandizing. When friends complimented her appearance, she'd respond with detailed explanations of her skincare routine or fitness regimen. When colleagues praised her work, she'd elaborate on her creative process and business philosophy. But when posts received fewer likes or comments than usual, Jessica would delete them within hours. She couldn't tolerate content that failed to generate the attention she craved. This obsession with social media metrics suggested someone whose confidence was more fragile than her polished exterior indicated. I created a detailed spreadsheet tracking Jessica's posting patterns, noting which types of content generated the most engagement and which seemed to make her uncomfortable. Photos with Marcus, her husband, consistently received fewer likes than her solo shots or images with friends. Her anniversary posts from previous years were notably brief and generic, compared to her elaborate birthday celebrations or professional achievements. This observation led me to focus more closely on Jessica's marriage to Mark. During family gatherings over the past 3 years, I'd always assumed they were happily married. They maintained the appropriate public displays of affection, attended events together, and presented a united front during family discussion. But now, examining their interactions with the analytical eye I'd previously reserved for consumer behavior studies, I began to notice subtle signs of dysfunction. Marcus worked as a financial advisor at a prestigious investment firm downtown. He was quiet, methodical, and seemed genuinely devoted to Jessica despite her more demanding personality. During family dinners, he'd often defer to her opinions, allow her to dominate conversations, and publicly praise her various accomplishments. I'd always interpreted this as loving support, but now I wondered if it might indicate something less healthy. The breakthrough came 3 weeks after returning from our honeymoon, during David's father's birthday celebration at the Chen family home. I'd been dreading this gathering, knowing it would be my first face-to-face encounter with Jessica since the wedding, but it also presented an opportunity to observe her in her natural habitat, surrounded by the family members who formed her primary audience. Jessica arrived 40 minutes late, claiming that a work emergency had delayed her departure from the office. She'd changed clothes since leaving work, trading her professional attire for a designer cocktail dress that was dramatically more formal than what anyone else was wearing to a casual family birthday dinner. Her entrance was orchestrated for maximum impact, complete with elaborate apologies and explanations that drew everyone's attention. "I'm so sorry I'm late," she announced upon entering the living room where the family had gathered for pre-dinner drink. "A client crisis that absolutely couldn't wait. You know how demanding high-end clients can be, but I wasn't going to miss Dad's special day for anything." The performance was flawless, positioning her late arrival as evidence of her professional success and dedication rather than simple inconsideration. She accepted the family's understanding with gracious humility while simultaneously emphasizing her importance at work and her commitment to family. It was masterfully executed manipulation disguised as sincere explanation. What I found more interesting was Marcus's reaction to her arrival. While everyone else welcomed Jessica warmly, Marcus barely looked up from his conversation with David about municipal engineering projects. When Jessica approached him for the expected kiss of greeting, he offered his cheek rather than his lips, and immediately returned his attention to his previous conversation. The slight was so subtle that I might have missed it if I hadn't been watching specifically for signs of tension between them. But Jessica's reaction confirmed that the dismissal had been intentional and hurtful. For just a moment, her perfectly composed expression flickered with something raw and vulnerable before she recovered and launched into animated conversation with David's mother about a new restaurant she'd discovered. Throughout the evening, I noticed other small indicators of marital discord. Marcus contradicted Jessica's story about their recent weekend in wine country, correcting details about which vineyards they'd visited and when they'd returned home. Jessica laughed off the corrections, but her smile grew more forced with each interruption. When she suggested they should plan a family vacation to Europe next summer, Marcus mentioned budget constraints that clearly embarrassed her in front of relatives who assumed they were financially comfortable. The most revealing moment came during gift opening. David's father had specifically requested no presents, preferring that family members make charitable donations in his honor. Jessica had ignored this request, presenting an expensive watch that she described in detail while emphasizing its cost and exclusivity. Marcus visibly cringed during her presentation, and when David's father politely thanked her, Marcus quietly mentioned that they'd be returning the watch and making a donation instead, as originally requested. The conflict between them was subtle but unmistakable. Jessica wanted to project an image of success and generosity that their actual finances couldn't support. Marcus was tired of the financial strain required to maintain her lifestyle aspiration. The tension had probably been building for months or years, hidden beneath the surface of their public persona as a successful young couple. I filed away these observations, while maintaining my own performance as the grateful new daughter-in-law. When Jessica complimented my post-honeymoon glow, I thanked her warmly. When she asked about our trip to Hawaii, I shared appropriately enthusiastic details. When she mentioned how much she'd enjoyed giving her speech at our wedding, I smiled and told her how memorable it had been. The conversation gave me another crucial piece of information. Jessica was proud of her wedding speech. She genuinely believed she'd been clever and entertaining rather than cruel and humiliating. This lack of self-awareness suggested that she'd likely never considered the possibility of retaliation. In her mind, she'd won a victory without consequences. This misconception would be central to my strategy. Jessica was expecting me to either forget about the wedding incident or confront her directly about it. She wasn't prepared for a patient, methodical response that would unfold over months of careful planning. The next phase of my research involved cultivating relationships that would provide access to information about Jessica's private life. This required delicate social engineering, establishing connections that seemed natural and innocent, while actually serving strategic purposes. I started with Marcus's sister Nicole, whom I'd met briefly at their wedding 4 years earlier. Nicole worked as a nurse at Portland General Hospital and had always seemed like the most genuine member of Marcus's family. She'd sent a thoughtful congratulations card after our wedding, and had mentioned wanting to get to know me better now that we were officially part of the extended family. I reached out to Nicole with a suggestion that we meet for coffee, ostensibly to develop our new sister-in-law relationship. She responded enthusiastically, proposing a weekend brunch at a trendy cafe in the Pearl District. Our conversation began with typical getting-to-know-you topics: my work in marketing, her experiences in healthcare, our mutual adjustment to being married into the Chen family. Nicole was refreshingly straightforward compared to Jessica's calculated persona. She spoke honestly about her own marriage, her career challenges, and her relationships with various family members. When the conversation naturally turned to our respective spouses, she offered insights into Marcus that proved invaluable. Marcus has always been the responsible one in our family, Nicole explained while we shared a plate of pastry. Even as kids, he was the one making sure everyone followed the rules, saved their allowances, finished their homework before playing. Sometimes I worry that he's too accommodating in his marriage. He has trouble saying no to people he cares about. This observation, aligned perfectly with my own assessment of Marcus's relationship with Jessica. His accommodating nature had likely enabled her increasingly demanding behavior, creating a dynamic where she pushed boundaries while he struggled to establish limits. "Jessica seems very confident," I offered carefully, testing how much Nicole might reveal about her sister-in-law. Nicole's expression grew more guarded, but she answered honestly, "Jessica is definitely someone who knows what she wants. Sometimes I think Marcus gets a little overwhelmed by her energy and ambition. They have very different approaches to money and lifestyle choices." The comment about money confirmed my suspicions about financial tension in their marriage. I filed away this information while steering the conversation toward safer topics, but the foundation for future intelligence gathering had been established. Nicole had revealed herself to be someone who paid attention to family dynamics and wasn't afraid to acknowledge problems when they existed. My next target was Jessica's workplace. Her LinkedIn profile indicated that she worked as a senior marketing consultant for Prestige Brands, a boutique firm that specialized in luxury consumer goods. The company's website featured Jessica prominently in their team profiles, emphasizing her expertise in lifestyle marketing and client relationship management. I arranged to attend a marketing professionals networking event, where I knew Jessica would be presenting a workshop on influencer partnerships. The event was held at the downtown Marriott, drawing marketing professionals from across the Portland metropolitan area. I registered under my maiden name and listed my employer simply as advertising professional to avoid immediate recognition. Jessica's presentation was polished and confident, demonstrating genuine expertise in her field. She spoke knowledgeably about social media trends, brand positioning strategies, and consumer psychology. Her professional competence made her personal cruelty even more disturbing, indicating that her wedding speech had been a calculated choice rather than a moment of poor judgment. During the networking reception following her presentation, I positioned myself within earshot of conversations involving Jessica and her colleagues. The insights I gathered were illuminating. Jessica was respected professionally, but not particularly well-liked personally. Her colleagues praised her client results while making subtle comments about her demanding personality and tendency to take credit for team achievements. "Jessica definitely gets results," I overheard one colleague telling another, "but she's not exactly a team player. Everything has to be about showcasing her individual contributions." Another conversation revealed that Jessica had recently been passed over for a promotion to creative director, despite her obvious qualifications and strong client relationship. The position had gone to a colleague with less seniority but better collaborative skills. Jessica had apparently taken the rejection poorly, creating tension within the office that everyone was still navigating. This professional disappointment provided another piece of the puzzle I was assembling. Jessica's need for external validation wasn't being met at work, which likely increased the pressure she felt to maintain her perfect image in other areas of her life. The failed promotion had probably intensified her focus on social media recognition and lifestyle displays that demonstrated success. I began following Jessica's professional activities more closely, attending industry events where she was speaking or networking. Each interaction provided additional intelligence about her motivations, insecurities, and behavioral patterns. I was building a comprehensive psychological profile that would inform every aspect of my eventual response to her wedding day humiliation. The most valuable intelligence came from an unexpected source. Jessica's hairstylist, Monica, worked at an upscale salon in the West Hills that catered to Portland's professional women. I booked an appointment for a color touch-up, mentioning casually that a friend had recommended Monica's work after seeing Jessica Chen's beautiful styling at a recent family event. Monica was exactly the type of hairstylist who thrived on client confidences, treating her chair as a combination therapy session and gossip central. When I mentioned Jessica by name, Monica's expression immediately brightened with recognition and anticipation. "Oh, Jessica," Monica said while applying hair color with practiced precision. "She's been coming to me for almost 2 years now, such a perfectionist about her appearance, always wants to try the latest trends, but only if she's absolutely certain they'll photograph well for her social media." I made appropriately interested noises while Monica continued sharing details about Jessica's beauty routine, her obsession with maintaining her image, and her frequent complaints about various aspects of her life. The information was more revealing than Jessica probably realized, painting a picture of someone whose anxiety about appearances extended far beyond normal vanity. "She's always stressed about money," Monica continued while we waited for the color to process. "Wants the most expensive treatments, but always asks about payment plans. Says her husband doesn't understand that her appearance is part of her professional success, so she has to be creative about budgeting for salon visits." This revelation was pure gold. Jessica was financing her lifestyle maintenance through methods that Marcus either didn't know about or didn't approve of. The financial stress in their marriage was apparently more severe than I'd initially suspected, creating opportunities for manipulation that I hadn't previously considered. Monica also revealed that Jessica had been asking about wedding hair trends recently, mentioning that she was planning something special for her upcoming anniversary celebration. This information immediately elevated the timeline for my own plan. Jessica was actively preparing for her anniversary, which meant I needed to be ready to implement my strategy well before she could execute whatever celebration she had in mind. Armed with months of accumulated intelligence, I began developing the specific tactics that would form my response to Jessica's wedding day attack. The plan needed to be sophisticated enough to avoid detection while being devastating enough to match the humiliation she'd inflicted on me. Most importantly, it needed to use her own weapons against her, turning her reliance on public image and social validation into the mechanism of her downfall. The anniversary gift idea had crystallized during a conversation with David about traditional anniversary presents. We'd been discussing what to give his parents for their upcoming 30th anniversary, when David mentioned that Jessica and Marcus would be celebrating their 4th anniversary in 2 months. 4 years is traditionally fruit or flowers, David had said while browsing gift ideas online. Though knowing Jessica, she'll probably expect something more extravagant. She's always been high maintenance about celebrations. The comment had triggered a memory of Jessica's social media posts from previous anniversaries. Each year, she'd documented elaborate celebrations that Marcus had presumably planned and paid for, expensive dinners, jewelry, weekend trips to luxury resorts. The posts always emphasized the cost and exclusivity of Marcus's gifts, positioning them as evidence of his love and their relationship's success. But this year would be different. This year, Jessica would receive an anniversary gift that would expose the reality behind her carefully constructed facade, a gift that would reveal the truth about her marriage, her finances, and her character to everyone who mattered to her. A gift that would be as public and humiliating as her wedding speech had been. The beauty of my plan was its simplicity and plausible deniability. I would give Jessica exactly what she craved, attention and recognition, but in a way that would destroy rather than enhance her reputation. The gift would appear generous and thoughtful on the surface, while actually exposing her deepest secrets and insecurities to public scrutiny. I spent weeks researching the specific details that would make the plan effective. Private investigators weren't necessary when so much information was available through public records, social media analysis, and careful observation. Jessica's own need for attention had created an extensive digital footprint that revealed far more about her private life than she probably realized. The financial records were particularly illuminating. Property records showed that Jessica and Marcus's house was mortgaged well beyond its market value. Credit monitoring services revealed multiple maxed-out credit cards and a history of late payment. Court records indicated that Jessica had been sued by a luxury handbag retailer for non-payment, though the case had been settled out of court. The picture that emerged was of a couple living far beyond their means, financing an unsustainable lifestyle through credit and debt, while maintaining the appearance of success. Marcus's steady income as a financial advisor was being systematically depleted by Jessica's spending habits, creating exactly the kind of marital stress that could be exploited by someone with sufficient patience and planning. But financial pressure alone wouldn't be enough to achieve the level of poetic justice I was seeking. Jessica's wedding speech had been personal, attacking my character and my worthiness of love and commitment. My response needed to be equally personal, targeting the core of her identity and self-worth. The key insight came from analyzing Jessica's social media engagement patterns more closely. Her posts about her marriage consistently received fewer interactions than her solo content, suggesting that her audience was more interested in her individual achievements than her relationship success. More telling, her anniversary posts from previous years had been deleted after failing to generate the level of engagement she expected. This pattern revealed a crucial vulnerability. Jessica's marriage wasn't actually the source of pride and validation she pretended it was. Instead, it was a source of insecurity that she was constantly trying to overcome through public displays of romantic success. The elaborate anniversary celebrations weren't expressions of genuine happiness, but desperate attempts to convince herself and others that her marriage was as perfect as her other achievements. My gift would exploit this vulnerability by forcing Jessica to confront the reality of her relationship in the most public way possible. It would be presented as a celebration of her marriage while actually exposing its fundamental problem. The audience would be the same people who had witnessed her humiliation of me at my wedding, ensuring that the symmetry of my revenge would be unmistakable. The final component of my plan involved timing and presentation. Jessica's anniversary fell on a Saturday in early October, which she had already announced on social media would be celebrated with a party at their home for close friends and family. The guest list would include the same people who had attended my wedding, creating the perfect audience for my response to her earlier attack. I would need access to the party to deliver the gift personally, ensuring maximum impact and eliminating any possibility that Jessica could suppress its contents before others saw them. This requirement meant coordinating with other family members who would be attending, positioning myself as a helpful and generous sister-in-law who wanted to contribute to the celebration. The gift itself would be beautifully wrapped and presented with genuine warmth, maintaining my cover as someone who had moved past the wedding incident and wanted only to strengthen our family relationship. Jessica's own vanity and need for attention would compel her to open the gift publicly, surrounded by the guests whose approval she craved. Only then would she discover that her new sister-in-law had been conducting her own investigation, gathering her own evidence, and planning her own perfectly timed revelation. The humiliation she had inflicted on my wedding day would be returned with interest, delivered with the same smile and false sincerity she had used to devastating effect months earlier. The contents of the anniversary gift would speak for themselves, requiring no explanation or justification from me. Jessica would be forced to confront the consequences of her actions while I maintained the same plausible deniability she had employed during her wedding speech. Anyone who questioned my motives could be dismissed as being overly sensitive or unable to appreciate a thoughtful gesture between sisters-in-law. As October approached and Jessica's anniversary party grew closer, I made my final preparations with the methodical care of someone whose professional success depended on flawless execution. Every detail had been researched, every contingency planned, every element designed to achieve maximum impact with minimum risk. Jessica had taught me valuable lessons about the power of public humiliation and the effectiveness of attacking someone's deepest insecurity. Now she was going to learn that some students surpass their teachers, and that revenge, when properly planned and patiently executed, could be far more devastating than the original offense. The anniversary gift was ready. The stage was set. All that remained was the performance itself. The envelope arrived on a Wednesday morning in late September, elegant cream cardstock with Jessica's flowing handwriting, announcing the details of their anniversary celebration. The invitation was characteristically elaborate, featuring embossed gold lettering and a wax seal with her and Marcus's intertwined initials. Even a simple party invitation had been transformed into a showcase of their supposed sophistication and success. Join us for an evening of celebration as we commemorate 4 wonderful years of marriage, the invitation read. Cocktails, dinner, and dancing in our home, surrounded by the love of family and friends who have supported our journey together. The language was pure Jessica, each word carefully chosen to reinforce the narrative of a perfect marriage celebrated by an adoring social circle. No mention was made of the actual cost of the celebration or the financial stress it would likely create, just as her social media posts never acknowledged the credit card debt behind her designer purchases. David read the invitation over my shoulder while I prepared my morning coffee, his expression fond as he absorbed the details. Jessica really goes all out for these anniversary parties, he commented. Marcus is lucky to have someone who puts so much effort into celebrating their relationship. His words stung more than they should have, carrying an implicit criticism of my own approach to romantic celebration. Jessica's elaborate gesture was being held up as the standard for how a devoted wife should behave, while my preference for intimate, low-key celebrations was found wanting by comparison. "It sounds lovely," I replied neutrally, though my mind was already calculating how this invitation fit into my carefully planned timeline. Jessica's anniversary party would provide the perfect venue for delivering my own gift, surrounded by the same audience that had witnessed her humiliation of me at our wedding. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of final preparation. I'd spent months gathering intelligence about Jessica's financial situation, her marriage troubles, and her professional disappointments. Now I needed to transform that information into a presentation that would be as devastating as it was seemingly innocent. The anniversary gift itself was a custom photo album, professionally bound in rich burgundy leather with Jessica and Marcus's names embossed in gold lettering on the cover. To any casual observer, it would appear to be exactly the kind of thoughtful, personal gift that demonstrated my growth as a loving sister-in-law who had moved past any awkwardness from our wedding day. The album's contents told a different story entirely. Each page had been meticulously designed to reveal a different aspect of Jessica's carefully hidden reality, presented as a celebration of their relationship while actually documenting its deterioration. The genius of the gift lay in its format: seemingly innocent family photos accompanied by captions that would expose truths Jessica had worked desperately to conceal. Page 1 featured a photo from their wedding 4 years earlier, with a caption reading, "Where it all began. Here's to Marcus, who said I do to supporting Jessica's dreams, even when those dreams cost $47 per month in minimum credit card payments." The specific dollar amount wasn't random, it was the exact figure I'd calculated from public financial records showing their current debt obligation. Subsequent pages followed the same pattern: cheerful family photos paired with devastating revelations presented as loving reminiscences. Jessica's promotion celebration dinner at La Bernada, $340 for two, charged to Marcus's emergency credit card because the promotion turned out to be lateral with no salary increase. Their romantic getaway to Napa Valley, financed through a personal loan that's still being paid off 18 months later. Each revelation was factually accurate, sourced from public records, court documents, and information I'd gathered through careful observation. More importantly, each one was presented with the same tone of loving sisterly affection that Jessica had used while demolishing my character at our wedding reception. The album's centerpiece was a 2-page spread featuring photos from Jessica's recent professional events, accompanied by a detailed timeline of her career disappointments disguised as a celebration of her ambition. Jessica's determination to succeed in marketing has led her through so many exciting opportunities. From the senior consultant position she was terminated from in 2019 for budget restructuring, to the creative director role she interviewed for 6 times before they chose someone with better collaboration skills. The information was presented as admiring recognition of Jessica's persistence in the face of professional challenges. But anyone reading it would immediately understand that her career trajectory was far less successful than her social media presence suggests. The careful documentation of her failures, complete with specific dates and circumstances, would make it impossible for her to dismiss the revelations as misunderstandings or exaggeration. But the album's most devastating page came near the end, featuring a recent photo of Jessica and Marcus at a charity gala, both dressed in formal wear and smiling for the camera. The caption read, "Jessica and Marcus at the Children's Hospital fundraiser where Jessica bid $2,200 on a silent auction item using Marcus's business credit card without his knowledge." The handbag was beautiful, even if it did result in that awkward conversation with his business partners about inappropriate use of company resources. This particular revelation was based on information I'd gathered through Nicole, who had mentioned Marcus's embarrassment about a recent incident involving Jessica's spending at a work-related social event. The specificity of the details would make denial impossible, while the cheerful tone would prevent Jessica from claiming malicious intent on my part. The album concluded with a heartfelt message expressing my gratitude for being welcomed into their family and my hopes for their continued happiness together. Here's to many more years of love, laughter, and the occasional financial adventure. Love always, your devoted sister-in-law Sarah. The closing message was particularly cruel in its apparent sincerity, mimicking the tone Jessica had used when delivering her wedding speech while simultaneously acknowledging that I knew exactly what I was doing. She would be forced to recognize that her own tactics were being turned against her, but she would be powerless to respond without appearing petty or vindictive. Creating the album had required weeks of careful work, designing each page to maximize emotional impact while maintaining plausible deniability. Professional printing services had produced a result that looked exactly like an expensive, thoughtful gift from a sister-in-law who had invested considerable time and effort in creating something meaningful. The wrapper was equally important to the overall effect. I'd chosen elegant silver paper with a sophisticated bow, accompanied by a card expressing my excitement about celebrating their anniversary and my gratitude for being part of their family. Everything about the presentation suggested genuine affection and thoughtfulness, making the album's actual contents even more shocking by contrast. 2 days before the party, I received a phone call from David's mother, Helen, asking if I could arrive early to help with party preparation. Jessica had apparently requested assistance from family members, claiming that the celebration had grown larger than originally planned, and she needed help ensuring everything was perfect. Jessica is so particular about these events, Helen explained during our conversation. She wants everything to be absolutely flawless for their guests. I think she's feeling a bit overwhelmed by all the details. The request for help provided an unexpected opportunity to observe Jessica's pre-party anxiety firsthand, while positioning myself as a supportive family member. I agreed immediately, offering to arrive 2 hours early to assist with whatever preparations were needed. The day of the anniversary party dawned clear and crisp, typical October weather in Portland with brilliant blue skies and autumn leaves, creating a picturesque backdrop for outdoor entertaining. Jessica and Marcus's house in the West Hills looked magnificent in the afternoon light, its contemporary architecture perfectly suited to the sophisticated celebration Jessica had planned. I arrived at 4 o'clock as requested, carrying the anniversary gift along with a bottle of expensive champagne I'd selected specifically for its impressive presentation. The champagne was an insurance policy, ensuring that my presence at the party would be welcomed and my gift would be received with appropriate gratitude. Jessica answered the door wearing a stunning cocktail dress in deep emerald green, her hair and makeup already perfect despite the party being hours away. Her appearance was flawless as always, but I could detect subtle signs of stress in the tightness around her eyes and the forced quality of her smile. "Sarah, thank you so much for coming early to help," she said, accepting the champagne with genuine appreciation. "You have no idea how much I need the extra hands today. This party has somehow become much more elaborate than I originally planned." The admission of being overwhelmed was uncharacteristic for Jessica, who typically projected complete control over every aspect of her life. Her willingness to acknowledge stress suggested that the anniversary celebration was more important to her than usual, possibly representing an attempt to rebuild confidence after her recent professional disappointments. "I'm happy to help," I replied warmly. "Anniversary celebrations should be special and I want yours to be absolutely perfect." Jessica led me through the house, pointing out various areas where assistance was needed. The living room had been transformed with elaborate floral arrangements and candles, creating an intimate atmosphere for cocktails. The dining room featured a buffet setup with catered food that looked restaurant quality in its presentation. The entire house sparkled with the kind of meticulous attention to detail that suggested considerable expense and planning. "Everything looks absolutely beautiful," I told her, and I was being completely honest. Jessica's eye for entertaining was genuinely impressive, even if the financial cost was probably unsustainable for their budget. "Marcus is going to be so surprised when he gets home from work." "I hope so," Jessica replied, though something in her tone suggested uncertainty rather than confidence. "He's been working so much lately, I sometimes feel like we barely see each other except for these special occasions." The comment revealed more about their relationship than Jessica probably intended. Marcus's increased work hours were likely a response to their financial pressures, but Jessica was interpreting his absence as emotional distance rather than economic necessity. Her elaborate party was probably an attempt to reconnect with her husband, through the only method she knew, expensive gestures and public displays of romance. Helen arrived shortly after me, followed by David's Aunt Margaret and Uncle Tom. Each family member brought contributions to the celebration: bottles of wine, desserts, flowers, and other hostess gifts that would help offset the party's cost. Jessica accepted each offering with gracious enthusiasm, though I noticed she was keeping mental track of who brought what and how much each item probably cost. As the afternoon progressed and more family members arrived to help with preparations, I observed Jessica's increasing anxiety about the evening's success. She checked her appearance in mirrors throughout the house, adjusted floral arrangements multiple times, and repeatedly asked for reassurance that everything looked perfect. Her need for validation was more obvious than usual, suggesting that this anniversary celebration carried emotional weight beyond a typical party. Marcus arrived home from work at 6:30, just 30 minutes before guests were scheduled to begin arriving. His greeting to Jessica was warm but distracted, the behavior of someone whose mind was still focused on work responsibilities rather than romantic celebration. Jessica's face fell slightly at his subdued reaction to the party preparations, though she recovered quickly when other family members praised her efforts. "This is incredible, Jess," Marcus said, surveying the transformed house with what appeared to be genuine appreciation mixed with mild concern. "You've really outdone yourself this year." The comment could be interpreted either as praise for Jessica's efforts or worry about their extravagance, and I suspected Marcus intended both meanings simultaneously. His appreciation for Jessica's work was sincere, but his awareness of their financial situation probably made him anxious about the celebration's cost. Guests began arriving promptly at 7, the same collection of family members and close friends who had attended our wedding 4 months earlier. Each arrival was greeted by Jessica with enthusiastic hugs and elaborate descriptions of the evening's planned activity. She was clearly in her element as hostess, directing conversations and ensuring everyone felt welcome while simultaneously managing the logistics of serving drinks and appetizers. I positioned myself strategically throughout the cocktail hour, observing interactions while waiting for the optimal moment to present my gift. The timing needed to be perfect, late enough in the evening that guests would be relaxed and attentive, but early enough that the revelation wouldn't be overshadowed by alcohol consumption or party fatigue. The opportunity came during dinner when Jessica called for everyone's attention to express gratitude for their attendance and support of her marriage to Marcus. She stood at the head of the dining table, wine glass in hand, radiating the confidence that came from being the center of positive attention. "Before we continue with dinner, I wanted to take a moment to thank everyone for being here tonight," Jessica began, her voice carrying easily throughout the room. "4 years ago, Marcus and I promised to love each other through whatever life might bring. Having all of you here to celebrate that promise means everything to us." The speech was beautifully delivered, heartfelt and sincere in a way that reminded me why Jessica was successful in her marketing career. She had genuine talent for connecting with audiences and creating emotional moments that felt authentic even when they were carefully orchestrated. "Marriage isn't always easy," she continued, glancing at Marcus with an expression of loving devotion. "But having the support of family and friends makes every challenge worthwhile. You've all been part of our journey, and we're so grateful for your love and encouragement." The assembled guests responded with warm applause and appreciative murmurs, clearly moved by Jessica's words and the obvious effort she'd put into creating a memorable celebration. This was Jessica at her best, generous and gracious, and genuinely likable when she wasn't actively undermining someone else's happiness. As the applause died down, I stood and raised my own glass, adopting the same warm tone Jessica had used during her wedding speech months earlier. "I hope you don't mind if I add something," I said, smiling at Jessica with apparent affection. "As the newest member of this family, I wanted to express my own gratitude for how welcomed I've been, especially by Jessica and Mark." Jessica's expression brightened with genuine pleasure at being singled out for praise. Her guard was completely down, expecting nothing but appreciation and support from someone she'd successfully humiliated just months earlier. "Jessica has taught me so much about what it means to be part of this family," I continued, maintaining eye contact with her while speaking to the room. "Her generosity, her attention to detail, her commitment to making every occasion special. I've learned so much from watching how she approaches relationships and celebrations. The compliments were technically accurate, though their true meaning would become clear shortly. Jessica had indeed taught me valuable lessons about manipulation, public humiliation, and the power of carefully timed revelations. She simply hadn't intended for me to learn those particular skills, which is why I wanted to give you something special tonight, I concluded, retrieving the beautifully wrapped album from my purse. A small token of appreciation for everything you've taught me about family, commitment, and the importance of understanding who people really are. I approached Jessica with the gift, maintaining the warm smile that had become my signature expression whenever I was about to destroy someone's carefully constructed facade. The wrapping was so elegant that several guests commented appreciatively on the presentation, building anticipation for the contents. "Sarah, you didn't need to bring anything," Jessica protested, though her eagerness to receive the gift was obvious. "Your presence here is gift enough." "I wanted to," I replied, placing the album in her hands with ceremonial care. "After everything you've done for me, especially your beautiful speech at my wedding, I felt I owed you something equally memorable." The reference to her wedding speech was subtle enough that most guests wouldn't catch the implication, but Jessica's momentary pause suggested she recognized the potential significance. For just an instant, her confident expression flickered with uncertainty before she recovered and began unwrapping the gift with renewed enthusiasm. "Oh my goodness," she exclaimed upon seeing the leather-bound album. "This is absolutely gorgeous. Look at this craftsmanship, Mark." Sarah had this professionally made. She opened the cover carefully, revealing the first page with its wedding photo and devastating caption. For a moment she simply stared at the page, her brain processing the contrast between the innocent image and the financial revelation accompanying. "What does it say?" asked David's mother, leaning closer to see the album's contents. "Sarah, this looks like such a thoughtful gift." Jessica's face had gone pale, but she was trapped by the social expectations of the moment. Dozens of guests were watching expectantly, waiting to see the contents of the beautiful album that had been presented with such obvious love and care. Refusing to share would seem inexplicably rude and would raise questions she couldn't possibly answer. Jessica began, her voice catching slightly. "It's a photo album documenting our relationship." She turned to the second page, revealing another smiling photo accompanied by another financial revelation. Her hands were trembling now, but she continued turning pages, while guests gathered closer to see the thoughtful gift their host had received. "Oh, how sweet," commented David's Aunt Margaret, reading over Jessica's shoulder, "though that's quite a lot of detail about your expenses, dear." Sarah certainly did her research. The comment was made innocently, but it highlighted exactly what I'd hoped people would notice. The album's contents were too specific, too detailed, too invasive to have been created by someone with innocent intention. The extensive financial information suggested surveillance rather than sisterly affection. Jessica continued turning pages, each revelation more damaging than the last. Her professional failures, her secret spending, her marriage problems, all documented with the same cheerful tone she'd used to chronicle my supposed shortcomings months earlier. The guests were beginning to understand that they were witnessing something more complex than a simple anniversary gift. "Fascinating level of detail," observed Marcus, his financial advisor's mind immediately recognizing the accuracy of the figures being cited. "Some of these numbers are quite specific, Sarah. How did you come by this information?" His question was precisely what I'd hoped someone would ask. It forced attention to the research methods I'd employed while allowing me to maintain innocent intentions. "Oh, just from family conversations and public records," I replied with a sweet smile. "You'd be amazed how much information is available when you really want to understand someone's journey." I thought Jessica would appreciate having her story documented so thoroughly, especially after she put so much effort into sharing insights about my own life at our wedding. The connection to Jessica's wedding speech was now explicit, though still presented as gratitude rather than retaliation. Anyone who had witnessed her humiliation of me would recognize the symmetry, but I was maintaining complete plausible deniability about my actual motivations. Jessica had reached the final pages of the album, her face now completely white as she absorbed the full scope of what I'd compiled about her life. The charity auction incident, documented in excruciating detail, was the final blow that removed any possibility of dismissing the album as a misguided but innocent gesture. Jessica began, then stopped, apparently unable to formulate a response that wouldn't reveal her awareness that she was being deliberately humiliated. "Comprehensive," supplied Marcus, his expression grim as he recognized several incidents he'd hoped to keep private. "Very comprehensive indeed." The room had fallen into uncomfortable silence as guests processed what they'd just witnessed. Jessica was still holding the album, seemingly frozen by the impossibility of responding appropriately to what was clearly an attack disguised as a thoughtful gift. "I hope you'll treasure it," I said warmly, breaking the silence with the same tone Jessica had used when concluding her wedding speech. "I put so much love and research into every page, just like you did with your wedding speech for me." The parallel was now unmistakable. I had returned Jessica's wedding day humiliation with interest, using her own methods against her while maintaining the same facade of loving concern she had employed. The difference was that my research had been more thorough, my presentation more devastating, and my timing absolutely perfect. Jessica finally found her voice, though it emerged as barely more than a whisper. "Thank you, Sarah. This is certainly very thorough." Her acknowledgement was the closest she could come to admitting defeat without explicitly confessing to her earlier attack on me. She recognized that I had outmaneuvered her completely, using superior research and more sophisticated psychological warfare to achieve a more devastating result than her improvised wedding speech. The party continued, but the atmosphere had fundamentally shifted. Guests made polite conversation while privately absorbing the implications of what they'd witnessed. Jessica's financial problems, her professional failures, and her marriage troubles were now public knowledge among the same people whose admiration she'd worked so hard to cultivate. Marcus excused himself early, claiming work obligations, but clearly uncomfortable with the evening's revelations. Other guests began departing shortly after, offering stilted congratulations on the anniversary, while avoiding direct reference to the gift exchange they'd witnessed. I remained until the end, helping Jessica clean up while maintaining the same friendly demeanor I'd displayed throughout the evening. She accepted my assistance without comment, both of us understanding that words were unnecessary at this point. As I prepared to leave, Jessica finally spoke directly about what had transpired. "You've made your point," she said quietly, not meeting my eyes. "I understand. I'm not sure what you mean," I replied innocently. "I just wanted to give you something as memorable as what you gave me at my wedding. I hope you'll think of me every time you look at it." Her expression acknowledged that she would indeed remember this evening, just as I would never forget her wedding speech. The difference was that my response had been more patient, more thorough, and more publicly devastating than her impulsive attack. "The album really is beautiful," I added with genuine sincerity. "I hope you and Marcus will enjoy looking through it together for years to come." With that parting comment, I left Jessica standing in her immaculately decorated home, surrounded by the remnants of a celebration that had become a public exposure of her carefully hidden failure. The anniversary gift would serve as a permanent reminder that actions have consequences, and that underestimating one's opponents can lead to far more devastating results than the original offense. The drive home was peaceful, filled with the satisfaction that comes from executing a complex plan flawlessly. Jessica had taught me valuable lessons about the power of public humiliation and the effectiveness of using someone's own insecurities against them. Now she understood that some students eventually surpass their teachers, and that revenge, when properly planned and patiently executed, could be far more devastating than the original attack. My wedding day humiliation had been avenged with interest, delivered with the same smile and false sincerity Jessica had used months earlier. The gift would keep giving, providing years of awkward family gatherings where everyone present would remember the anniversary party, when Jessica's perfect facade had been systematically demolished by someone she'd underestimated completely. The night moves in unexpected ways, but always finds its target. Jessica was about to learn that lesson from the receiving end. The aftermath began immediately. By Sunday morning, less than 18 hours after the anniversary party, my phone was buzzing with messages from family members who had witnessed Jessica's public unraveling. Some expressed concern, others curiosity, and a few barely concealed satisfaction at seeing someone so seemingly perfect revealed to have very human flaws. David's cousin Rebecca texted first, her message carefully neutral but obviously fishing for information. That was quite an interesting gift you gave Jessica last night. Very detailed research. Hope everything is okay with everyone. Similar messages followed throughout the morning, each sender trying to understand what they had witnessed without appearing too eager for gossip. The careful wording revealed that everyone recognized the evening had been significant, but no one wanted to be the first to explicitly acknowledge that they had watched a masterfully executed revenge plot unfold in real time. David himself seemed genuinely confused by the entire situation. He had spent the drive home from the party asking questions about how I had gathered such specific information about Jessica and Marcus's finances, and why I had chosen to present it in such a public format. "I don't understand what you were trying to accomplish," he said over breakfast, his engineering mind struggling to process the emotional complexity of what he had witnessed. That album contained very personal information, even if it was technically accurate. Sharing it like that seemed cruel. His criticism stung, partly because it was partially valid, but mostly because it revealed his continued inability to recognize the parallels between my actions and his sister's behavior at our wedding. Jessica's public humiliation of me had been dismissed as harmless teasing, while my response was being characterized as unnecessarily cruel. "I wanted to give Jessica something memorable," I replied, maintaining the innocent tone I had perfected over months of planning. "She put so much effort into her speech at our wedding. I felt I should reciprocate with something equally personal and well-researched." David paused, his coffee cup halfway to his lips, as the connection finally registered. For the first time since our wedding day, he seemed to grasp that Jessica's speech might have been intentionally hurtful rather than merely tactless. "You think Jessica was trying to embarrass you at our wedding?" he asked, his voice carrying genuine surprise at the possibility. The question revealed the depth of his obliviousness to his sister's behavior. David had genuinely believed that Jessica's systematically humiliating speech had been well-intentioned sisterly teasing, rather than calculated cruelty. His inability to recognize obvious emotional manipulation explained why he had failed to defend me when I needed him most. "I think Jessica is very skilled at presenting her true feelings in socially acceptable ways," I answered carefully, "just like I tried to present my appreciation for her guidance in an appropriate format last night." This conversation marked the beginning of a shift in our relationship that would prove to be one of the most significant consequences of my revenge plan. David was finally beginning to question assumptions about his family that he had never previously examined, recognizing patterns of behavior that his loyalty had prevented him from seeing clearly. The more immediate aftermath involved Jessica herself, who seemed to have entered a state of complete social hibernation following the anniversary party. Her usually active social media presence went completely silent for the first time in years. No Instagram posts about her morning coffee routine, no Facebook updates about work projects, no LinkedIn articles about marketing trends. The woman who had built her identity around curated online content had suddenly vanished from digital existence. This disappearance was particularly telling because it occurred during what should have been prime content season for Jessica's social media strategy. The anniversary party should have generated weeks of posts celebrating their relationship milestone, thanking guests for their attendance, and showcasing the elaborate decorations and catering she had arranged. Instead, there was nothing but conspicuous silence. Nicole called me 3 days after the party, her voice carefully modulated as she attempted to understand what had transpired without appearing to take sides in whatever family drama was unfolding. "I wanted to check in about the weekend," she said after we exchanged pleasantries. "Marcus seemed pretty shaken up when I talked to him yesterday. He mentioned that your anniversary gift had included some information that surprised him." The conversation revealed that Marcus had been unaware of several aspects of Jessica's financial behavior that my album had documented. The charity auction incident in particular had been news to him, creating a confrontation between the couple that had continued well beyond the party's conclusion. "I hope I didn't cause any problems," I said, with genuine concern coloring my voice. I thought Marcus would appreciate having their relationship milestones documented so thoroughly. I certainly would have wanted David to know about any financial commitments I was making in his name. Nicole's slight pause suggested she recognized the implications of my comment. Marcus's embarrassment about the charity auction hadn't been about the expenditure itself, but about his discovery that Jessica had used his business credit card without permission, potentially jeopardizing his professional reputation with colleagues and clients. "Well, communication is important in marriage," Nicole agreed diplomatically. "I'm sure they'll work through whatever misunderstandings might have come up." But her tone suggested she was less optimistic about Jessica and Marcus's ability to resolve the fundamental trust issues that my gift had exposed. The album hadn't created their problems, it had simply made existing fractures impossible to ignore or deny. The reverberations continued throughout the week as various family members processed what they had learned about Jessica's carefully hidden struggle. Her professional disappointments, financial irresponsibility, and marriage difficulties had been revealed to exactly the audience whose approval she valued most, creating a social embarrassment that couldn't be easily overcome or forgotten. More damaging than the specific revelations was the broader recognition that Jessica's entire public persona had been carefully constructed to hide significant personal failures. Family members who had previously admired her success and confidence were now questioning everything they thought they knew about her life and character. David's mother, Helen, called Thursday evening with what she described as concerns about family harmony, though her real purpose seemed to be gathering additional information about the situation. "I've been thinking about Saturday night," she said after we had discussed her garden club activities and David's latest work projects. "That photo album you made for Jessica was certainly comprehensive. It must have taken considerable time to research and compile all that information." Helen's comment was diplomatically phrased, but her meaning was clear. She understood that my gift hadn't been a spontaneous gesture of sisterly affection, but rather the result of extensive investigation and careful planning. The question was whether she approved of my methods or found them concerning. I wanted to give Jessica something that reflected the same level of attention and care she had put into her wedding speech for me, I replied, maintaining the parallel that justified my action. She clearly invested significant effort in researching my background and sharing those insights with our wedding guests. Helen was quiet for a moment, and I could practically hear her mental gears turning as she reconsidered Jessica's wedding speech in light of recent events. Like David, she had apparently interpreted Jessica's comments as harmless teasing rather than deliberate humiliation. "I see," she said finally. "Well, I suppose everyone has different approaches to expressing affection within family." Her diplomatic response suggested that she was beginning to understand the true nature of both Jessica's wedding speech and my anniversary gift, while choosing not to explicitly take sides in what she recognized as a complex family conflict. The most significant development came Friday morning when David received a call from Marcus requesting a private conversation. The brothers-in-law had always maintained a cordial but distant relationship, making Marcus's initiative both surprising and telling about the severity of the situation. They met for lunch at a downtown restaurant, and David returned home that evening with a much clearer understanding of the problems in Jessica and Marcus's marriage that my gift had exposed. The conversation had apparently been eye-opening for David, revealing financial pressures and relationship tensions that he had never suspected. "Marcus told me some things about Jessica that I didn't know," David said carefully as we prepared dinner together. "About her spending habits and some professional difficulties she's been having. He seems to think your album was very accurate in its details." This confirmation from Marcus himself validated every piece of information I had included in the anniversary gift. My research had been thorough and accurate, which made it impossible for Jessica to dismiss the revelations as exaggerations or misunderstandings. "He also said that Jessica has been different since Saturday night," David continued. "Withdrawn and anxious in ways he hasn't seen before. He's worried about her emotional state." The news of Jessica's psychological distress should have brought me satisfaction, but instead, I felt a complex mixture of vindication and unexpected sympathy. My revenge had been successful beyond my most optimistic expectations, but the human cost was becoming apparent in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. Jessica's silence continued through the weekend, creating an increasingly noticeable absence in the family's social ecosystem. She missed David's father's birthday dinner on Sunday, claiming illness but actually avoiding the first family gathering since her anniversary party. Her absence was felt by everyone present, highlighting how central she had become to the family's social dynamics, despite the resentment her controlling behavior sometimes generated. The gathering provided an opportunity to observe how other family members were processing the events of the previous weekend. Conversations were slightly stilted, with Jessica's absence creating an elephant in the room dynamic that no one wanted to address directly but everyone was thinking about. David's aunt, Margaret, made several pointed comments about the importance of financial transparency in marriage, while his uncle Tom mentioned reading recent articles about credit card debt among young professionals. These topics had never been part of family dinner conversation before, suggesting that my anniversary gift had prompted broader discussions about money and relationship honesty. Most telling was the change in how family members referenced Jessica when she wasn't present. Previously, conversations about her had focused on her professional achievements, her entertaining skills, and her apparent success in managing the various demands of modern life. Now, comments carried undertones of concern and questioning that revealed fundamental shifts in perception. "I hope Jessica is feeling better soon," David's mother commented during dessert. "She's been under so much pressure lately with work and everything else." The phrase "everything else" encompassed all the issues that my album had revealed without explicitly acknowledging them. Financial pressure, marriage problems, and professional disappointments were now part of how the family understood Jessica's life, even when they weren't discussing them directly. By the beginning of the second week following the anniversary party, it became clear that my revenge had triggered consequences far beyond what I had originally planned. Jessica's withdrawal from family and social activities was creating ripple effects throughout the extended family network, forcing everyone to reconsider relationships and assumptions they had previously taken for granted. David's evolving understanding of his sister's behavior was perhaps the most significant personal consequence for me. Our conversations about family dynamics had become deeper and more honest than they had ever been, as he began to recognize patterns of manipulation and emotional dysfunction that his loyalty had previously prevented him from acknowledging. "I've been thinking about Jessica's wedding speech," he told me Tuesday evening as we walked through our neighborhood. "At the time, I thought she was just being direct about her concern. But looking back, especially after this weekend, I'm starting to think she might have been intentionally trying to hurt you." This recognition represented major progress in David's emotional intelligence and his understanding of the complex dynamics within his family. For the first time, he was beginning to see Jessica's behavior from my perspective rather than automatically defending her intentions. "I should have said something at the wedding," he continued, his voice carrying genuine regret. "Even if I didn't understand what was happening, I should have supported you instead of making excuses for her." His apology was meaningful not just for its content, but for what it revealed about his growing awareness of emotional subtleties he had previously missed. The anniversary party had forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about his sister and his own failure to protect his wife when she needed him most. The second major consequence involved Jessica's relationship with Marcus, which appeared to be deteriorating rapidly under the weight of the trust issues my gift had exposed. According to Nicole, who had become an inadvertent source of information about their marriage troubles, Jessica and Marcus were attending couples counseling and considering a temporary separation while they worked through their financial and communication problems. "Marcus is having trouble trusting Jessica about money decisions," Nicole confided during a coffee meeting we had scheduled ostensibly to discuss holiday gift planning. "The charity auction thing really bothered him because it involved his professional reputation. He's worried about what else he might not know about." This revelation indicated that my anniversary gift had accomplished something far more significant than public embarrassment. It had fundamentally altered the trust dynamic in Jessica's marriage by exposing patterns of financial deception that Marcus had been unaware of. The album hadn't created these problems, but it had made them impossible to ignore or rationalize away. The professional consequences were equally severe. Jessica's extended absence from social media had been noticed by her colleagues and clients at prestige brands, raising questions about her availability and commitment during a particularly busy season for luxury marketing campaigns. "She missed 2 client presentations this week," Nicole reported, having heard the information from a mutual acquaintance who worked in Portland's marketing community. "Apparently she called in sick both times, but people are starting to wonder if there's something more serious going on." Jessica's reputation for reliability and professional excellence was being undermined by her inability to maintain normal work routines in the aftermath of her public humiliation. The psychological impact of my revenge was interfering with her ability to function professionally, creating additional stress that compounded her existing problems. By the third week following the anniversary party, the full scope of my victory was becoming apparent. Jessica's carefully constructed life was unraveling in multiple dimensions simultaneously, personal, professional, and social, creating a cascade of consequences that extended far beyond what any single incident should have been able to accomplish. The devastation was so complete precisely because it had targeted the foundation of Jessica's identity rather than just her reputation. She had built her sense of self around projecting success and control, using external validation to mask underlying insecurities and failure. My anniversary gift had systematically demolished those projections, forcing her to confront realities she had worked desperately to hide. Yet as the extent of Jessica's downfall became clear, I found myself experiencing unexpected emotions about what I had accomplished. The satisfaction of successful revenge was complicated by recognition that I had perhaps been more thorough and devastating than necessary to achieve justice for my wedding day humiliation. Jessica had attacked my character in a moment of cruel opportunism, using her position as family member and wedding party participant to inflict maximum damage with minimal consequences for herself. My response had been methodical, comprehensive, and designed to create lasting damage to every aspect of her life she valued most. The symmetry was perfect, but the proportionality was perhaps questionable. Jessica's wedding speech had been cruel and humiliating, but it had been contained to a single evening and hadn't threatened her marriage, career, or fundamental sense of identity. My anniversary gift was continuing to generate consequences weeks later, dismantling the life she had spent years building. This recognition didn't diminish the satisfaction of having successfully defended myself against someone who had underestimated my capacity for strategic thinking and patient planning. Jessica had chosen to make me a target when I was vulnerable, and she had learned that some apparently weak people possess hidden strengths that become apparent only when they're properly motivated. The chess game was essentially over, with Jessica's position so thoroughly compromised that recovery would require years of rebuilding trust, relationships, and reputation. She had been checkmated by an opponent she had dismissed as pathetic and uncommitted, learning too late that her assessment had been fatally inaccurate. But as I contemplated the complete scope of my victory, I also began to consider what came next. Revenge had been satisfying, but it was ultimately a negative achievement, destroying rather than creating. The energy and intelligence I had devoted to planning Jessica's downfall could now be redirected toward more positive purposes. The family dynamics would need to be carefully managed going forward, balancing my justified satisfaction with the practical necessity of maintaining relationships with people who would be part of my life indefinitely. Jessica's behavior had been inexcusable, but she was still David's sister, and would remain connected to our family regardless of whatever personal consequences she faced. More importantly, I had proven to myself that I possessed capabilities I had never previously recognized or tested. The research skills, strategic thinking, and psychological insight required to execute my revenge plan successfully could be applied to professional and personal challenges that would benefit rather than destroy lives. The anniversary gift had accomplished its intended purpose of restoring the balance of power between Jessica and me while demonstrating that actions have consequences. Now it was time to consider how to use my newfound understanding of my own capabilities to build something positive, rather than simply maintaining the ability to tear down those who threatened me. The Queen had successfully defended her position and eliminated a significant threat. Now it was time to plan the next phase of the game, one focused on advancement rather than merely survival. 6 months later, I stood in the same Grand Ballroom at Riverside Manor where my wedding humiliation had occurred, but this time I was there for a very different reason. The venue was hosting a charity auction for children's literacy programs, and I had volunteered to coordinate the marketing materials as part of my company's community outreach initiative. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now confidently managing an event in the same space where Jessica had once made me feel small and powerless. The ballroom looked different in the afternoon light, elegant but less intimidating than it had seemed on my wedding night. I moved through the space with purpose and authority, directing volunteers and coordinating with vendors with the kind of professional competence that Jessica had once questioned publicly. My phone buzzed with a text from David, who was finishing up a project meeting before joining me at the venue. Running 20 minutes late, everything under control there. The message was routine, but it represented something significant about how our relationship had evolved since the anniversary party incident. David had become more attentive to my professional capabilities and personal strength, recognizing qualities in me that he had somehow overlooked during our courtship and early marriage. The confidence I had displayed in orchestrating Jessica's downfall had apparently opened his eyes to aspects of my personality that had been hidden beneath my preference for avoiding confrontation. All good here, I texted. Vendor coordination is actually quite similar to managing marketing campaigns. The comparison was apt in more ways than David probably realized. Both required understanding multiple stakeholders, managing competing priorities, and maintaining clear communication while working towards specific objectives. The skills that had made me successful in advertising had translated seamlessly into event management, just as they had proven effective in psychological warfare. As I reviewed the auction catalog one final time, my attention was caught by a familiar name among the donor acknowledgements. Jessica Chen was listed as contributing a luxury handbag collection to the silent auction, with a note indicating the donation's estimated value at over $3,000. The gesture was surprising for several reasons. Jessica had been essentially invisible in family and social circles since her anniversary party, avoiding events and maintaining minimal contact with relatives who had witnessed her public exposure. Her decision to donate expensive items to charity suggested either genuine contrition or a calculated attempt to rebuild her reputation through visible generosity. More intriguingly, the donation represented a significant financial sacrifice for someone whose spending habits had already strained her marriage's budget. Jessica's willingness to part with luxury items that had previously been essential to her self-image indicated fundamental changes in her priorities and self-perception. I was examining the handbags themselves, displayed on a table near the registration area, when I noticed a familiar figure approaching from across the ballroom. Jessica walked slowly, almost hesitantly, her usual confident stride replaced by something more cautious and uncertain. She looked different than she had at family gatherings over the past year. Her appearance was still polished and professional, but the desperate perfection that had once characterized her presentation had been replaced by something more natural and sustainable. Her clothing was elegant but less obviously expensive, her makeup skillfully applied but not camera-ready, her overall demeanor suggesting someone who had learned to find validation from sources other than external appearance. "Hello, Sarah," she said when she reached the auction table, her voice carrying none of the artificial warmth that had once marked our interactions. "I didn't expect to see you here today." The comment wasn't accusatory or uncomfortable, simply observational. Jessica seemed genuinely surprised by my presence rather than disturbed by it, suggesting that she had moved beyond the acute distress that had characterized her behavior immediately following the anniversary party. "I'm coordinating the marketing materials for the event," I replied matter-of-factly. "Harrison and Associates is one of the corporate sponsors this year." Jessica nodded, her expression revealing what might have been genuine respect for my professional involvement. The woman who had once questioned my commitment and follow-through was now observing me successfully managing a complex community event with apparent competence and authority. "The auction looks very well organized," she commented, glancing around the ballroom with what appeared to be professional assessment rather than personal anxiety. "The vendor coordination must have been challenging with this many participants." Her observation was accurate and demonstrated the marketing expertise that had made her successful in her career. Despite our personal history, Jessica was apparently capable of recognizing and acknowledging professional competence when she encountered it. "It's been educational," I agree. "Very similar to campaign management, just with different stakeholders and objectives." We stood in slightly awkward silence for a moment, both apparently uncertain about how to navigate a conversation that was neither hostile nor artificially friendly. The anniversary party had fundamentally altered the dynamics between us, creating a new equilibrium that neither of us had fully explored. "I wanted to thank you," Jessica said suddenly, her words surprising me with their apparent sincerity, "for the anniversary gift. It was difficult at the time, but it forced some important conversations that needed to happen." The gratitude was unexpected and seemed genuine rather than manipulative. Jessica appeared to have reached some level of acceptance about the consequences of her actions, and my response to them, viewing the entire sequence of events as ultimately beneficial despite their painful nature. "I'm glad it was helpful," I replied carefully, unsure whether her acknowledgement was leading toward reconciliation or simply closure. Sometimes difficult conversations are necessary for personal growth. Jessica's slight smile suggested she appreciated the diplomatic phrasing that allowed both of us to acknowledge what had occurred without explicitly relitigating the details. We had moved beyond the immediate aftermath of our conflict into something more mature and potentially sustainable. "Marcus and I separated in February," she continued, her tone remaining steady despite the personal nature of the disclosure. "We're working with a counselor to determine whether reconciliation is possible, but there were trust issues that went deeper than either of us had realized." The information confirmed what family rumors had suggested but provided more context about the timeline and Jessica's perspective on their marriage trouble. Her willingness to discuss the situation openly indicated significant changes in her approach to personal relationships and emotional honesty. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and found that I meant it despite everything that had transpired between us. Relationship difficulties are always challenging, regardless of the circumstances that bring them to light. Jessica nodded appreciatively at my diplomatic response. "The counseling has been helpful for understanding communication patterns that weren't working and for recognizing behaviors that were contributing to problems I didn't want to acknowledge." This admission suggested genuine self-reflection and personal growth rather than simply damage control. Jessica seemed to be using the crisis in her marriage as an opportunity for psychological development, rather than merely trying to restore her previous life. David arrived as we were concluding our conversation, his expression registering surprise at finding Jessica and me engaged in apparently civil discussion. His relationship with his sister had remained strained since the anniversary party, though they had gradually resumed limited contact through family occasions and brief phone calls. "Jessica," he said with cautious warmth, "I didn't know you were involved with this event." "I donated some items to the silent auction," she replied, gesturing toward the handbag display. "Seemed like a good time to simplify my possessions and support a worthy cause." David's expression suggested he understood the broader implications of her decision to donate luxury items that had previously been central to her lifestyle. The gesture represented more than charitable giving. It indicated fundamental changes in her relationship with material possessions and external status symbols. "That's very generous," he said sincerely. "The literacy programs will definitely benefit from contributions like that." The conversation continued for several more minutes, covering neutral topics related to the charity event and general family news. The interaction was cordial but not intimate, reflecting the current state of relationships that had been permanently altered by recent events, but were slowly stabilizing in new configuration. As the afternoon progressed and auction guests began arriving, I found myself reflecting on the unexpected nature of my encounter with Jessica. The woman I had systematically destroyed months earlier had emerged from her crisis apparently stronger and more self-aware than she had been before. My revenge had achieved its intended purpose of rebalancing power between us, but it had also inadvertently created opportunities for genuine personal growth that Jessica had chosen to embrace. The auction itself was successful, raising significant funds for children's literacy programs while providing networking opportunities for Portland's business and nonprofit community. I moved through the event with confidence and competence, managing logistics while building professional relationships that would benefit both my career and future community involvement. Several attendees complimented the organization and presentation of the event, validation that felt more meaningful than any external recognition I had received previously. The skills I had developed through marketing work and refined through planning, Jessica's downfall, were proving valuable in contexts that created positive rather than destructive outcomes. As the evening concluded and vendors began cleaning up the ballroom, David found me reviewing final auction totals with the nonprofit's executive director. His expression was proud and slightly amazed, as if he was seeing capabilities in me that he hadn't previously recognized or fully appreciated. "You were incredible tonight," he said as we walked to our car after saying goodbye to the last volunteers. "The way you coordinated everything, managed the logistics, handled problems as they came up, I had no idea you had those kinds of organizational skills. His comment stung slightly because it revealed how limited his understanding of my capabilities had been, but it also represented growth in his perception of me as a partner and individual. The confidence I had displayed in orchestrating Jessica's revenge and managing community events was apparently helping him recognize strengths he had somehow overlooked previously. Marketing requires a lot of project management, I replied as we settled into the car for the drive home. Coordinating vendors, managing timelines, solving problems as they arise. Tonight was really just applying those skills in a different context. David was quiet for a moment. As he processed this observation, I think I've been underestimating you, he said finally. Not just tonight, but in general. You're much more strategically minded than I realized. The admission was both gratifying and sobering, confirming that my husband had indeed failed to recognize fundamental aspects of my personality and capabilities during our courtship and early marriage. Jessica's wedding speech had been cruel, but it had apparently reflected perceptions that weren't entirely inaccurate at the time. People often underestimate quiet individuals, I replied diplomatically, but quiet doesn't necessarily mean weak or uncommitted. The comment referenced Jessica's wedding speech, without explicitly relitigating old grievances, allowing David to draw his own connections between past events and present reality. He seemed to understand the broader implications of my observation, recognizing how his own assumptions about my character had been challenged and revised. 1 year after the anniversary party that had marked the climax of my revenge against Jessica, I received an unexpected phone call from Mark. We had maintained minimal contact since his separation from Jessica, exchanging pleasantries at family gatherings, but avoiding deeper conversations about the circumstances that had led to their marriage troubles. I wanted to call and thank you, he said after we had exchanged initial greetings, for the anniversary gift last year. I know it was intended for Jessica, but it ended up being exactly what I needed to understand our relationship dynamic. His gratitude was surprising but seemed genuine, suggesting that my revenge had ultimately benefited him by exposing problems that had been undermining his marriage without his knowledge. The album's revelations about Jessica's financial deception and professional struggles had apparently provided crucial information for making informed decisions about their future. The counseling has been helpful, he continued. We're working on rebuilding trust and establishing better communication patterns. It's been difficult, but I think we're both becoming healthier people through the process. The update indicated that Jessica and Marcus were making genuine progress in addressing the fundamental issues in their relationship, rather than simply trying to restore their previous dynamic. My revenge had created a crisis that forced necessary conversations and changes that might never have occurred otherwise. I'm glad you're both finding the process beneficial, I replied sincerely. Sometimes difficult revelations create opportunities for growth that wouldn't exist otherwise. Marcus agreed, then shared that he and Jessica were planning to renew their vows in a small ceremony later that year, symbolizing their commitment to the relationship they were building rather than trying to recreate what they had lost. The gesture represented genuine progress rather than mere reconciliation. As I ended the call with Marcus, I reflected on the unexpected trajectory that my revenge had ultimately taken. What had begun as justified retaliation for Jessica's wedding day, cruelty had evolved into a catalyst for positive changes in multiple people's lives. Jessica had been forced to confront personal and professional issues that were undermining her happiness. Marcus had gained insight into relationship dynamics that had been causing him stress and confusion. David had developed a more accurate and appreciative understanding of my capabilities and character. Even my own life had been enhanced by the confidence and skills I had discovered through planning and executing my response to Jessica's attack. The strategic thinking, research abilities, and psychological insight required for successful revenge had proven valuable in professional and personal contexts that created rather than destroyed value. The anniversary gift had accomplished its intended purpose of restoring balance and demonstrating that actions have consequences, but it had also inadvertently created opportunities for growth, understanding, and improved relationships that extended far beyond my original objective. Standing again in the Grand Ballroom where my humiliation had occurred, But now, as a successful event coordinator rather than a humiliated bride, I could appreciate the full scope of what had been accomplished through patient planning and strategic thinking. Jessica had taught me valuable lessons about power, manipulation, and the importance of defending oneself against those who mistake kindness for weakness. The night had indeed moved in unexpected ways, but had found its target with precision and ultimately beneficial results for everyone involved. Sometimes the most effective revenge is the kind that transforms everyone it touches, creating opportunities for growth and improvement that justify the pain required to achieve them. The game was complete, and all the players were stronger for having participated in it. 2 years had passed since that fateful anniversary party, and life had settled into a rhythm I never could have imagined during those dark months of planning my revenge. I was promoted to Senior Marketing Director at Harrison & Associates, my event coordination skills having caught the attention of senior management after the literacy charity auction's overwhelming success. Jessica and Marcus renewed their vows in an intimate ceremony at a small vineyard outside the city, attended only by immediate family. The woman who once craved elaborate celebrations had discovered the beauty of genuine moments shared with people who truly matter. When she asked me to be part of the ceremony, reading a poem about forgiveness and new beginnings, I understood that our relationship had transformed into something neither of us had expected. David and I purchased our first home together, a craftsman bungalow that needed restoration work. As we planned the renovations, he frequently deferred to my judgment on design decisions and project management, trusting capabilities he had learned to recognize and value. Our marriage had grown stronger through the trials that had tested us, emerging more honest and resilient than before. The anniversary gift album still sat on Jessica and Marcus's bookshelf, no longer a symbol of humiliation but a reminder of how far they had traveled together. Jessica had framed one of the photos from it, the image of them at their original wedding, with a new caption she had written herself: "Every marriage has a story. Ours includes learning to be honest about our failures and grateful for second chance." During family gatherings, conversations flowed more naturally than they had in years. The artificial perfection that had once characterized our interactions had been replaced by genuine connection and mutual respect. We all carried scars from the conflicts that had reshaped our relationships, but those scars had taught us valuable lessons about authenticity, forgiveness, and the strength that comes from facing difficult truths. Sometimes people asked me if I regretted the way I had handled Jessica's wedding speech, whether I wished I had chosen a more direct approach to resolving our conflict. The question always made me pause, considering the complex web of consequences that had flowed from my decision to respond with calculated patience, rather than immediate confrontation. The truth was that my revenge had accomplished something more valuable than simple retribution. It had forced all of us to examine ourselves honestly, to confront uncomfortable realities we had been avoiding, and to build new relationships based on genuine understanding, rather than convenient assumption. The pain had been real and significant, but it had ultimately created opportunities for growth that might never have existed otherwise. Jessica's transformation had been the most dramatic, but we had all changed in meaningful ways. I had discovered strength and strategic capability I never knew I possessed. David had learned to see beyond surface appearances, to recognize the complex person he had married. Marcus had gained insight into relationship dynamics that had been undermining his happiness without his awareness. The anniversary gift had been my masterpiece of psychological warfare, but its legacy extended far beyond the victory it had represented. It had become a catalyst for positive change that continued to influence our lives years later, proving that sometimes the most effective revenge is the kind that ultimately benefits everyone it touches. Looking back, I could appreciate the elegant symmetry of what had unfolded. Jessica had attempted to diminish me at my wedding, using public humiliation as a weapon to assert her dominance within our family dynamic. My response had used her own methods against her, but with such precision and thoroughness that it had exposed truths she needed to confront for her own well-being. The chess game that had begun with her cruel speech had concluded with victories for all the players, each of us, stronger and more self-aware than we had been at the start. The night had indeed moved in unexpected ways, finding its target, while creating opportunities for transformation that justified the strategic patience required to achieve them. As I closed this chapter of my life and looked toward the future, I carried with me the confidence that comes from knowing I could defend myself against anyone who might mistake my kindness for weakness. The skills I had developed in orchestrating Jessica's downfall remained available if needed, but I hoped to apply them only to challenges that built, rather than destroyed, that created value rather than simply settling score. The wedding dress I had worn on that humiliating night now hung preserved in our closet, no longer a symbol of vulnerability, but a reminder of how far I had traveled from the woman who had been blindsided by her sister-in-law's cruelty. I had learned to be strategic without being cruel, patient without being passive, and strong without sacrificing the compassion that made life worth living. The gift that ended Jessica's marriage had ultimately saved it, teaching both partners lessons about honesty, communication, and the importance of building relationships on solid foundations, rather than beautiful facades. Sometimes the most devastating revelations become the foundation for genuine healing, and the most carefully planned revenge becomes an unexpected gift of wisdom and growth. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.